presented by the Strong Blue Line Foundation and powered by Moose Ridge Coffee in Snake River Landing, Idaho Falls. Welcome to the podcast, where former San Antonio police officer, author, and pastor Tim Rupp walks you through real-life scenarios involving our police officers and digs into the depths of facts and opinions on each case. This is Cop Talk, and it starts now.
Hi, welcome to the Strong Blue Line's Cop Talk. I'm Tim Rupp in Arkansas. Actually, Gary, I'm out in the middle of alfalfa fields recording this show.
Really?
Yes. So we're having some work done on the place we're staying, and so I can't be in there because they're making noise, construction and stuff. But we're right next to an alfalfa field, so where the deer were playing, not the antelope. There's no antelope here.
Not the antelope. Okay.
Last night there were a bunch of deer out here where I'm at right now. So
I'll be darned.
anyway, that's where I'm at in western Arkansas, and of course that's Gary, the operations manager for the Rev.FM in studio.
Yeah, here we are again.
How's the weather there in Idaho, Gary?
Well, it's warming up a bit, Tim. About 40s, even low 50s, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So March and kite weather. So of course it's always windy, but yeah, we're temps are. I think we're moving into spring.
Wow, it's been extremely cold down here for a little bit. It'll dip down. Last week we got down to. Or a couple weeks ago, at the end of February, we got down to 6 degrees here.
Ooh.
It was extremely cold, but it's warmed up now. We're in March, and things are really turning, man. It's beautiful weather, rain, but we have beautiful days. So, anyways, it's been good to be here.
That's good.
A lot going on.
Yeah.
Staying busy. We had seminars last month in Ruston, Louisiana. And matter of fact, we had one yesterday in Ruston, another one, a different one for law enforcement yesterday on March the 4th.
That is great.
We had one a couple weeks ago in Russellville, Arkansas. So we've been around, we've been moving, and we staying busy.
That is so fantastic, Tim. Just spreading the word and bringing hope. So important.
It is, and we got to pause. For a little bit here, but on the end of the month, we're going to go down to Slidell, Louisiana, Pearl River, Louisiana, and then over to New Mexico, just outside of Albuquerque.
Oh,
so we have 3 more this month, and then we'll be on. So
wow, that's exciting. Well, at the end of April, I'll be in New Orleans for a radio conference. So my first time in that area, south. That's
so you're going to New Orleans itself on NOLA, huh?
Yeah.
NOLA.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was at Ruston, I told him I was going down to the New Orleans area. I said, "Did I say that right?" They said, "Yes." So
good.
Make sure you pronounce New Orleans properly.
Okay, New Orleans. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
New Orleans.
That is important.
It is. Hey, Gary, here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about minor offenders, repeat offenders, and the death penalty.
Okay.
So,
I like it.
Kind of interesting stuff.
Yeah, those will be good topics.
Yeah. So, but before we get to that, let's give honor to the officers who were killed on this day in history, March the 5th. So I have Assistant Provost Marshal John B. Cook, United States Army Criminal Investigation Division, U.S. government. So, I did not know that the Criminal Investigation Division dated back to 1865. I did not know that.
I didn't either. Wow.
Yeah, I had no idea. When I was in the Air Force, I worked with Army CID.
Okay.
A little bit, and even as a investigator with San Antonio Police Department, I worked with the Army CID when it involved Army personnel or something that occurred on an Army post or something. So, anyways,
that's cool.
Provost Marshal, that's the top dog. He's the assistant, so he's assistant to the top dog. But end of watch Sunday, March 5th, 1865.
Ooh.
So this is right at the end of the Civil War. Remember, the Civil War was over in April of of 1865.
That's right.
Matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and read this article on it. Less than a month before the Civil War ended, 2 Army deserters who feared being arrested by Assistant Provost Marshal Cook went looking for him at his house in Cambridge, Ohio. Mrs. Cook answered the door, and the men asked to speak with her husband. Not knowing their intentions, his wife said that Mr. Cook would be returning shortly. One of the men went into the alley behind the house where he encountered Assistant Provost Marshal Cook. They greeted each other. The subject pulled out a pistol and fatally shot him. Both men fled the scene but were arrested several days later. They were both convicted of murder in a military court-martial and sentenced to death. They were executed by hanging at Camp Chase, Ohio on September 6, 1865.
Oh, my goodness.
So these guys were worried about, and deserters, they could be hanged,
Yeah.
for deserting.
Right.
But the war was almost over. They probably could have just slipped out and, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
The war's over. The country's worried about getting together, not looking for deserters and stuff. But
Exactly.
they had to go out and commit murder. Then they both end up getting hanged.
Oh, my goodness.
And it says Marshal Cook was survived by his wife, age 47 years old. Wasn't that old?
No. Again,
No,
young.
no.
Yeah.
And it was. What do you have there, Gary?
This is Police Officer Nathan Hayden Heidelberg. And this is end of watch March 5th, 2019. So 4 years ago. Officer Heidelberg, a probation officer that he was training, and 2 other officers responded to a burglary alarm at 2:30 in the morning. And so they were at the open front door. So the door was open. They were making loud announcements, identifying themselves. And this is when the homeowner opened fire toward the flashlight that Officer Heidelberg was holding. And Officer Heidelberg was struck above his vest. And so then he was transported to a local hospital where he later passed away. So the homeowner who shot him, and this is interesting, homeowner who shot him was arrested, charged with manslaughter, and the man was acquitted. This was in December 2021, where he claimed at trial that he couldn't hear the announcements from the officers, and so he opened fire in self-defense. And so Officer Heidelberg, he had served with the Midland Police Department for 5 years, survived by his parents and 3 sisters. And in 2019, officers honored Officer Heidelberg by renaming a portion of a local highway the Nathan Heidelberg Memorial Highway. So he was 28 years. His tour was 5 years. So interesting that he was charged with manslaughter. I mean, with...
Yeah, and of course we don't know the details of what happened, but for them to charge him, there must have been more to it. I'm not really sure. They must have felt like they really announced themselves, who they were. But you got to look at, if you're a homeowner and somebody's banging on your door at 2:30 in the morning, who is that?
Yeah, right.
And so, and I hear matter of fact, when I teach some of my seminars to church people, church security, they ask me, well, what about, if you shoot somebody and, what's the jury going to, are you going to be charged? And I always tell them, I said, I can't tell you what you're going to be charged. I can't, it's always different. And I said, and I tell them, I said, you very, very well may be charged and you may be arrested. So you just gotta be careful, make sure you follow the law. And I tell them, I said, you just be honest about stuff. Don't try to make up a story to make yourself look better. Just be honest. And generally, especially when a citizen shoots somebody, generally the truth will come out.
Mm-hmm.
rarely it happens, but rarely are citizens falsely, or unjustly, I should say, unjustly convicted and sentenced to prison.
Yeah.
So,
it's so unfortunate, regardless.
A terrible thing, but officers need to be really careful, because you're thinking you're going there for a burglary, and you get the wrong house, or maybe you get the right house. Somebody called in a false alarm, like, your neighbor doesn't like you, Gary, or something, and he calls in a burglary at your house, knowing you're home. So the police get there and they're thinking it's a burglary and nobody's home, and you're there.
Yeah.
So who knows exactly what happened, but it's a tragic situation. Once again, it underscores the fact that policing is a dangerous business.
It sure is.
So we just, officers have to be careful, and I told you before, when before we started the show, I told you my son-in-law, who now is a law enforcement, he's still in his training, OJT, if you will, field training, but he made his first arrest in the forest. He's like, well, what are them forest guys doing arresting people? They're law enforcement officers. You'd be surprised what goes on in these national forests. And matter of fact, we were also talking about a case where, there's a lot of murders that take place in national forest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People dumping bodies and, maybe taking the body out there to try to get rid of it, try to hide it and stuff. So there's all kinds of crime going on. And now I don't want to scare you from going to national forest because they're massive and they're beautiful, but you got to be careful.
You really do.
Where you go.
Yep. And they're much, they are needed. Law enforcement for national forest officers are needed. It's among all departments, but that's specifically, yeah. So that's
and
good.
it's a dangerous job, and many of the people they deal with are armed,
Mm-hmm.
And so, legally armed, hunters and stuff, but they're still armed. You're always dealing with people who have firearms.
Right.
So.
Yep.
So I said we're going to talk about minor offenders, repeat offenders, and the death penalty. So I want to bring out this one article, and this comes from San Antonio, and this really hit home with me because on my Facebook page, I'm on the Retired Police Officers, San Antonio Police Officers Facebook page, and it came out and said, keep officers in prayer. 7 SAPD officers were shot. I'm like, oh my goodness. And so I found it, and this happened on Wednesday, January 22nd. And so I want to go through this article here, Gary, and it found out that this guy that did all the shooting, he was really charged with minor crimes originally. And but officers were called. So let's go through this.
Okay, sounds good.
San Antonio Police Chief William McManus confirmed that 7 officers were shot in Stone Oak on Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. On Wednesday evening, after responding to a call for a possible suicide attempt. So officers are getting a call for a possible suicide. The suspect, now identified as 46-year-old Brandon Scott Polis, barricaded himself in an apartment for several hours, and he was later found dead by SWAT officers. The incident began around 8:30 p.m. on Wednesday. That was the 22nd of January, just less than a couple months ago, at the Centera Heights apartment complex at the 18,700 block of Stone Oak Parkway. As they arrived, a woman exited the apartment and said the man was shooting inside, and he was coming out of the apartment. The suspect then exited the apartment and opened fire on the responding officer, striking one in the leg. The first officer who arrived was shot, and six officers subsequent to that were shot as well, McManus said in a Facebook interview. The suspect remained inside the apartment. SWAT made the location, and after several hours of negotiating, the suspect was found deceased. The suspect barricaded himself inside the apartment for several hours. At the end of the event, the suspect was found deceased, McManus said. At the time, it is uncertain if the suspect sustained a self-inflicted gunshot or if SWAT officers shot the suspect. And Gary, let me interject here. I think they found out later that they went in and he presented a weapon, and SWAT officers did end up shooting him and killing him.
Oh.
So even after shooting 7 officers, he's still trying to kill officers, It says that 7 officers involved have 4 to 8 years of service. And as of Thursday afternoon, so just a couple days later, 6 of the officers were already released from the hospital. So thank the Lord for that.
Mm-hmm.
And one is still in the hospital, but he's expected to fully recover. McManus didn't speak to reporters. A resident of the apartment, I found this interesting, a resident of the apartment complex, Joseph Laredo, earlier told KENS 5 that he was studying for an exam when he heard a loud pop and then saw helicopters overhead. He later heard a series of shots fired. And this is what he says, quote, "I just heard a loud pop. It was like a single pop. I didn't think much of it. My mom was living with me, and she told me to come out on the balcony because she heard a lot of noise," Laredo said. Sure enough, when we got out on the balcony, we heard a bunch of helicopters, and then 20 seconds after we were out there, we heard more shots. It was like 2 or 3 shots. I told my mom, "Hey, Mom, those are gunshots." Laredo later described a police officer that he saw at the scene. He said, "I saw an SAPD officer on the ground. It looked like he got shot. The only reason I think he got shot is that they were putting like a tourniquet on him, and they dragged him away." So that's some firsthand interviews of somebody's seeing officers in a war zone, if you will, almost. I mean, just had an apartment complex.
Yeah, that is horrible.
And some other research I did on, the guy was armed with a shotgun and a revolver. So he was shooting officers with shotguns and a revolver, and the thing is, he had been arrested on the 18th. This happened on the 22nd. On the 18th, just 4 days prior, he had been arrested for DUI and for hitting some old folks. And matter of fact, I think it says it down here at the bottom. It said, according to a preliminary report obtained by KENS 5, Polos had arrived at their residence in the 7400 block of Obogledo Lane, I guess how you pronounce it, in an intoxicated state. This was on the 18th. An argument began, which quickly turned physical as 3 other people confronted him about his intoxication. He allegedly pushed one of the people, an 81-year-old woman.
Wow.
And caused her to hit her head. A 40-year-old woman intervened, and he pushed her as well and dragged her by her hair.
Oh my!
Then an 83-year-old man intervened, and Polos allegedly hit him in the face, causing visible injuries.
What the heck?
And so you got this guy. He gets drunk. He picks on old people and women, and but he's released and he's out in 4 days. So he got a personal recognizance of PR bail, or it was a low bail or something. He got out, and 4 days later he's threatened to commit suicide, and he ends up shooting and hitting 7 police officers. That's just crazy.
That is crazy.
And this underscores the fact, Gary, that minor or what we think of as quote non-violent criminals. Now, this guy did hit some people. That's violence, but it was old people. I'm not saying that. I'm not excusing it. What I'm saying is, you don't think this guy's going to be a threat, maybe to police officers.
Exactly. Yep, I agree.
And he's DUI, gets this stuff, he gets out, and this is some of the problems with our system. Guys get let out quickly instead of sitting and having some time to cool off.
Right.
It's a turncoat. I said he was out 4 days later. He was probably out later that day.
Oh yeah.
On the same day it is out, and 2 or 3 days later this happens. And so officers really need to be careful, whoever they're dealing with. A lot of people ask me that, well, do I look like a criminal? Why are they treating me this way? You don't know who you don't know who you're dealing with.
Exactly. And in cases like this, it's not the officers, it's the system. That it's the officers aren't controlling that when he's released, and when what I mean? Like,
yes.
That's a system. That's a failed system, if you will.
You're exactly right. And and the Bible has, so what does that mean from a biblical perspective, a biblical worldview? there's a couple things. You read through the Proverbs and you see over and over about the fool and not adhering to wisdom.
Yeah.
Not adhering to discipline. And it talks about in the Proverbs and other places in scriptures about disciplining our children.
Mm-hmm.
And as you discipline them, they recognize authority. And ultimately, it's the authority of God. And as you teach your children that there is an authority over you, you do not have the right to do whatever you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
There are rules that you must live by. As you grow up as a child, there are family rules. You're in a family. I'm sure you had rule when you're raising your children in your family, Gary. There are rules.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
You got teenagers now, and they got to be home at a certain time.
Yeah.
Or, hey, Dad, can I go here? Yes or no? They ask permission to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And the more they're responsible and show themselves as responsible young people, the more freedoms they get.
Mm-hmm.
And they can make decisions.
That's right.
But if you don't discipline them, if you just let them go and do whatever they want to do, they get to feel entitled, where the law doesn't apply to them. And then they go and they disrespect their teachers. Then they disrespect law enforcement officers. And a lot of these kids go down the wrong way. You know, you wonder, you scratch your head and you say, why does this 13, 14, 15, 20-year-old, 22-year-old, why did they just do this and think they can get away with it?
Mm-hmm.
Because they have their whole lives.
Exactly. Yeah.
They keep on getting away with stuff.
Yep.
And
they keep doing it.
And you see this over and over. We were talking about that Gabby Petito. Remember that?
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce her name?
Petito. Gabby Petito. Yep.
Gabby Petito and her boyfriend. I can't think of his name right now. I think it's Adam or something like that. I think it's Adam. But he had killed her in Wyoming. They were on a trip. He killed her in Wyoming. And what had happened is right after he did it, he was on the phone to his mother for an hour.
Yeah.
And then they went and hired a lawyer, and he shows up at home. And they refused to talk to the police, and he refused to.
Right. Brian Landry.
Yeah, Landry's. Yeah.
Yeah, Brian.
And so
yeah.
Mom and Dad are covering for son.
Yeah. Big time.
Who he had just committed a murder and trying to, get, and it's just, there needs to be responsibility.
Sure does.
And when we teach our children that there are consequences when you do something wrong.
Yeah.
If you tell your 3-year-old, do not do this or you'll get, then there needs to be some consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is, if they, whatever is appropriate for their age. You don't want to do things that is not age appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the children need to learn discipline. They need to learn respect for authority, and so forth. And Gary, did you look at the clock lately?
Oh, no,
Yeah,
I not until now, Tim.
I can't believe it. We were going to go through some other stuff. We didn't even get to the one about the death penalty. So we're going to have to do that next time.
Okay, yeah,
We'll do that next time.
sounds good.
So, hey, thanks, Gary. I appreciate it. But we're out of time, my brother.
We are.
Hey, and thank you for listening in. If you have a topic, a question you want addressed on Cop Talk, please send me an email. You can email suggestions, questions, comments, or complaints to coptalk@therev.fm. That's coptalk@therev.fm. It's off from the good book today. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Thank you for joining and helping to make the thin blue line a strong blue line.
Cop Talk is presented by the Strong Blue Line Foundation and sponsored by Moose Ridge Coffee in Snake River Landing, Idaho Falls. Questions and comments are always welcome by email to coptalk@therev.fm. Listen, follow, leave a review, and share this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or YouTube. And visit thestrongblueline.org to learn how you can be a supporter. Cop Talk is a Rev FM production, produced and edited by Gary Austin. Thank you for joining us. on Cop Talk.